you saw how the black and white columns worked, and there was only 2 different columns. Now here, these have been broken apart. These are just cubes, 3 isometric faces joined together. This is not a symbol. But if it were, notice how it goes, this color scheme. And then the second color is right here going up and all the way down the line. So there are 5 different columns instead of 2, the black and white. Now we got 5. And this is just when it's a methodical march of colors. If you mix these columns up, it becomes much more random and organic, and the likelihood of 2 of the same color sitting next to one another increases. So that's when it gets a little more complicated to figure this out if you don't want colors to clump together. But something like this gives you a real different effect once you start carving it away, and I'll try to do this fairly quickly so you can see what happens. And we'll just carve this away. And this is a pretty simple and very common isometric shape. But on the Twitter feed, you'll see that I've done some really unusual things with this in Photoshop, and that will be the next part of this quest. But it involves, see, these are still cubes. It involves taking this and, of course, making a copy of it. You always want to preserve what you've been working with in case you make a mistake. But I'm going to ungroup this, then click, and now you can select individual faces. Now see this dot that appears? That needs to be activated manually. So if I click and shift click and shift click and click, 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 I'm holding down shift while I'm doing this. In order to select these faces, I get this dot, which is very helpful in seeing what's selected. This is under Window Attributes. Attributes is right here. Now I happen to have attributes out here, and by default, this is closed up and you can't see what's going on, which isn't a lot of help. But this is the default setting for attributes. You actually have to turn it on. And the best way to do it, at least as far as I'm concerned, is to select everything and then manually turn it on. So you've got everything selected, and then you can go and shift click and group things. And what's the point of that? Now, a lot of you don't want to do this. It's just extra work. Scotchko, it doesn't matter. You just make an extra work. Well, think about it. Think about the excess geometry that's there. And you think, oh, it's not that much. I mean, how many cubes can there be? Well, this is a 5 by 5 by 5. Now, do I have all these faces? Nope. Right there. Boom and boom. So I'm going to group that. 5 by 5 by 5. So that's 125 faces. But then, or excuse me, cubes, if it's 5 by 5 by 5. And then each cube has 3 faces on it, right? So 3 times 5 is 375. And each cube has, I get all these guys? Oh, I got this other one, so I'm going to shift click to deselect that. And I got all those. I'm going to grip it. So 375 times 4, because each cube has 4 independent points, and I'll just round 375 up to 400. That would be 1,600. So it's somewhere around 1,375. That's how many points there are. So start doing the math, and Illustrator's really doing a lot of work. I don't know if I grouped that. I'm going to group it again. Illustrator's doing a lot of work, and you can save, not only save Illustrator a lot of moaning and groaning, because this is just a 5 by 5 by 5, and some of you guys are going with these huge cubes. Let me tell you, bigger is not always better. It's not always more visually interesting. So I've grouped these 3 sides, and we'll get back to that. Bigger is not always better. Oh, I didn't group this side. There we go. I just left that one out. So now I'll group that and click. I mean, shift click and shift click, and I missed this guy right here. So now everything is selected. So I'm going to group that, and with everything selected, I can highlight everything, and then I'm just going to, when I selected that, I'll move this aside just so you can see what's there. Hold down shift. That is what's left over in the background. And that is something we can work with for another purpose. So, Command G, and this in and of itself, zoom in on it. It's kind of cool. You know, could this be useful? And the answer is yeah, if you think about it. So the idea that we spend that extra time in order to separate the faces from what's hiding behind it has a multiple purpose, and it really is useful. And then turning this into a pattern, and I won't use my shortcut because we may have some beginners here. Object, pattern, make. And then all you do with a hexagon is just change the grid type down to hex by row. You have a perfect pattern. You can give it a name and then click done. And then out here, I'm going to Command 0, maybe Command minus so I can get a little more room. I'll add another layer, turn that one off. Get the rectangle tool. It doesn't matter, any fill, no stroke. Click and drag. Click once on our new pattern, and then we can scale this. We can reposition it. And a lot of you aren't scaling. This is really important. The idea that this is a pretty good size, so this isn't too bad. But I could go to Object, Transform, Scale, and then we have non-uniform because that was how we made the cube. Click on Uniform. You never want to do anything like that. Deselect, Transform Objects right there. Make sure Preview is on. And I'll just change that to 120 just for kicks. And say, hey, I like that. Click OK. And then, do we need to center this? You got a little piece over here. You got a bigger piece over here. Why not? All we do is hit Return. And because we had a big drastic move, I always hit 0, tab 0. And then come back up to horizontal. And horizontal, I want to move it to the right. So I hit the up arrow, and it starts moving to the right. That looks pretty good. And I'll hit tab to get the down arrow. Look at what I got. And I don't like those little things up at the top. So we'll move it up and say, yeah, right there. That's where I like it. Now there's our pattern. What can we do with it? Well, maybe tomorrow I'll show you something about Photoshop. And maybe this isn't the best shape for our pattern either.